Oh, I'm tired, everybody. We're going to make it through the rest of this week, though. Welcome into the show. Let me bring the music down so it's not me yelling over these sweet jams. That should be a little bit closer to accurate. It is weekend review day. We're going to demo the 2-show day again here in this one. We'll see how that goes on day 2. I thought yesterday went relatively well by all accounts. I'm still sort of getting a feel for what it means for our page. Like, does it mean additional subscribers are going to float in? I actually don't know, but we're going to try it. We're going to see what happens. Just getting a couple things set up here in the background while we settle in for the show. I want to make sure as many of you that actually want to be here for First Five are here for First Five. First Five, baby. First 5 questions in the chat room. They get answered pre-show. So if you have one, throw it in there. I think this is going to be probably a relatively quiet day. We'll see how it goes. This is the time of the year. It's a little bit of a sad time of the year because you start to see listenership and viewership slowly taper off as everybody's leagues end or people get eliminated. It's kind of a combination effort. So we may drop First Five and just go to questions at the end at some point here. But let's go to Jeff first. Best stream for tomorrow for 3-pointers, assists, and steals. Some names available are Chris Dunn, Terrence Mann, Ochai Agbaji, Eric Gordon, Kyle Lowry. I think I'd go Chris Dunn and just accept the fact that you're probably only getting 1 3-pointer because the assists and the steals for him are going to be very, very good. I don't see anyone else on that list that could even come close to what he can do in 2 of the 3 categories, and then you're just sort of like kind of hoping for the other one. No questions. Just wanted to say thanks so much, Dan, for all your help this season in a finals week for one of my leagues and losing by an edge with all my ad spend. Hope I can get the chip. Good luck, buddy. You're welcome. We'll keep grinding here. That's it. Is it time to drop Terry Rozier? You know, they play again tonight, so I would say not until we find out what everybody's status is for this evening. He left halfway through yesterday's ball game, which was an unbelievable kick in the nads. I have so many Hornets on my 1 remaining cash head-to-head team, and like only Nick Richards made it through the damn ball game of all the Hornets that I had. I have unbridled sadness when it comes to that stuff. Hey, drop a like and a sub here on this one if the spirit possesses you here for a moment. Top 3 favorite categories. No, 3-pointers is actually not in my top 3 favorite categories. My top 3 are both percentages and blocks. Super weird, I know. I'm a weirdo. But here's the thing. If you want to stay ahead of the game in fantasy sports, and you're in super competitive leagues, you gotta have to zag when everybody's zigging. And 12 years ago or whatever it was, whenever more than that now, our founder Aaron Bruschi came up with the term cash counters, because there's counting stats, which is points, rebounds, assists, and then there's the cash counting stats, which 15 years ago was steals, blocks, and threes. But eventually, now everybody shoots the 3-pointer, so that's no longer really a cash stat the way it used to be. Threes have become extremely prevalent. I think you can argue that steals and blocks are still very important. Steals fluctuate a lot. Forget week to week, even season to season, guys go through these weird up and down years. One of the things that you can really sort of loot from your league are percentages. Now, this is an easier one to sell for those of you watching that play Roto, because head-to-head, guys have bad weeks, and so a really good free throw shooter, you might just lose free throws one week if that guy either doesn't get to the line or has a line where he misses 4 free throws in one game. That's super annoying. But Roto, it's percentages and blocks. I think blocks are still just a really easy category to win because people often ignore it. Do you think Terry Rozier, Kelly Oubre Jr., or Lauri Markkanen will play again this week? It's hard for me to say. Charlotte's going to be super careful, and it does feel like they could lean into shutdown mode. That takes care of two of those names. Utah's not eliminated yet. I think Markkanen actually really did hurt himself. So that is maybe even more upsetting. So I'm going to say no to all of them. I think you might see, there's a chance you might see Markkanen or Rozier on Sunday, but I call that a 50-50. So, the smart play would be to say yes, because all I need is one of those three guys to play one game for the answer to be yes on this one. But I'm gonna lead towards no. Is it better to go after a top 10 player who plays the most games in a week, but is in the high volume days, or a top 50 player who plays in the low volume games during the week? If you can find a top 10 player, you get them. I'll make this question a little bit harder for myself and say like a top 50 player who plays on high volume days versus a top 80 player who goes on the low volume days. I think in that one, you probably lean towards the low volume day guy to maximize your games. The beauty of a top 10 player is that they just do so much that it almost doesn't matter what you get out of other guys on your team. Even if they're going on a high volume day, if you get a top 10 player, you just squeeze out whoever your 11th best guy is. And the jump you get going from a dude who's probably a top 110 type of play to a 10 type of play is just immeasurable. You're going from Dante DiVincenzo to Jason Tatum. You take that. That is a monumental jump. Oop. Instacart updates in the middle of a show today. It's always something, isn't it? Stupid ass Dan. Let's just do this one because it's actually the last question in the chat room here this morning. Because everybody sort of feels like I do, I think, on their Friday. Hey, the LA USD strike is off, so no children, at least not mine, are going to wander into the room during the podcast. Say nothing for another child that walks in the front door. It is unlocked because, I pretend it's the 1950s. Just lost Terry Rozier and Kelly Oubre, and I have one ad left for the week. Do I drop one of them? If yes, which one? Fighting maintain first in a no games cap roto league, and each stat matters. Can you buy a few minutes until later on today? Charlotte's in Dallas. That's a 5:30 start time. Unfortunately, it's not the super early start we usually get out of the Hornets. But you'll probably know if either of those guys is in by 4:30. So that only knocks out the first 3 games. That would give you 7 games still to pick from if you wanted to pivot off of one of those dudes. I think if we find out both are ruled out, I would probably drop Oubre because he looked like he actually got hurt. But maybe we get lucky and one of them plays. Smash them like button, y'all. Yes, sir. Smash it. I can't fake I'd like to do the Steve Buscemi, like, hello, fellow young people thing, because that is kind of me in a nutshell. Old man, slightly young face. Very old man, slightly young face. I am just going to humbly request that you please click the thumbs up and please do subscribe. I'll say it again during the mid part of the show because I tend to lop off this beginning part when I go through in the editing process after the fact. But let's go ahead and get this thing started, everybody. I'm going to leave the music where it's at. I'll bring it down just the tiniest bit. We'll count down from 10. We'll get this show started because I got to get my recording software booted up. Count it down in your brain, everybody, and then we are rolling. Oh, we don't get to do many more of these weekend review pods. That makes Dano sad. I think I sounded a little bit like Christoph doing the voice of Sven the reindeer for just a moment there. Yeah, you parents know what I'm talking about. That makes Dano sad. This is a terrible start to a podcast, but I don't care. I don't care. This is our third to last. I guess it depends on whether or not I do a weekend review show next Friday and then the very last Friday of the season. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do that last Friday. April the 7th is the last Friday of the regular season. I don't think you guys are going to need me to do a weekend review at that point. I mean, we're talking 3 games left. You probably would like me to do shows that weekend. Maybe I could do that. Let's check the old calendar here live on the podcast. Dan will go to his family's calendar and see what we got going on the weekend of April 7, 8, and 9. Anything? You know what? Not really. All right, maybe we'll do some shows that weekend just to try to get squeeze those last few games in. I don't know. We'll figure it out. No promises, you jerks. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. It is indeed a weekend review show. Maybe it's our last one. I don't know. Probably do one more next week. We'll go through the rest of season ads, the chopping block, which I had to change drops to chopping block because some of these guys are like real close to drops, but not necessarily all the way there. We've got holds, we got watch list, and of course we got the injury stream bucket, which while we continue to do, again, as sort of a beginning of the show warning, we're going to continue to try, when scheduling allows, 2 shows per weekday right now, where this is your morning edition. We're live on YouTube. We are also available on all recorded podcast distribution sites. And then the afternoon show, when we get a little bit more injury news, we can put together kind of a what to watch for type of board for the evening. We'll talk playoff streaming board for the evening. It's just an opportunity to get a little bit deeper into the weeds and not have to rush through all of that stuff the way I feel like we have been lately. And frankly, I feel like I've been talking way faster on the podcasts. And I don't know if that's because we're going live on YouTube. And so I feel like it looks super weird for me to do my usual deep breath between thoughts, sip of water, figure out exactly what is the next thing I want to say. I've been trying to talk through a lot of that stuff, but I think I need to slow myself down a little bit. Do 2 shows. I don't need a rush. I don't know how much time there's going to be for all of this, but we're going to make it happen. Everybody on YouTube getting to watch me clean my eyes here at the start of the show. You guys get to see what my actual eye color was for a moment there. All right, a throat clear and off we go. I am at Dan Vespers on Twitter, but you guys know that by now. We are largely promo-free these days with the exception of the Fantasy Pass, which has the baseball draft guide in it, and I'll tell you more about that in the middle of the show. Let's dive on in. Rest of season ads. There's no category right now that perfectly encapsulates the different chunks of players that I want to go over. But to call them rest of season plays is about the closest thing to it. And the first one on the board is Karis LeVert, who probably sort of falls into more of the until he cools off bucket, because we do know that this stretch he's on right now, which is an extremely efficient 3-point shooting, defensive stat getting, non-free throw ruining iteration of Karis LeVert, that just doesn't last forever. I wish it did, but it doesn't. So roll with it until the wheels come off, which, there's a non-zero chance that the wheels don't come off for the next 2 weeks. So that becomes rest of season. Rest of season just has a different meaning when there's 2 weeks and a couple of days left in the year to when there's 3 months left. There was no way I'd call him a rest of season ad 2 months ago, because this type of efficiency just isn't going to stick for 10 weeks in a row. But 3, doable. Russell Westbrook, who we talked about he's really an injury replacement type of play, but we know that Paul George is out for the rest of the regular season. Russ is very much not a 9-cat roto play because, as we saw last night, Clippers had a blowout win over Oklahoma City yesterday, and Russ, by all accounts, put up a solid fantasy line, but missed some free throws, had a bunch of turnovers. There's just always something that, even on a really good night for Russ, 24 points, 7 assists, and a couple of threes and a block, you're not going to complain about that, but there's always something. There's always something that holds him back from 9-cat roto value. 8-cat, he was a big winner yesterday because you wipe out those 4 turnovers. And then points leagues, he's going to go buck wild here with Paul George out. So I didn't feel like you could go injury stream there when the player is likely out for the rest of the regular season. You guys might find some fault in that because there might end up being a player in my injury board here coming up that does end up playing for the rest of the season. But, whatever. I made my cutoff somewhat arbitrary. Just roll with it. Next name on the board, Jonathan Kuminga, who on yesterday's show, I think I called him very close to a rest of season ad and then ultimately kind of just left him on the schedule play board. It just feels like he's finally earned Steve Kerr's trust. Now, the problem for Kuminga is that one of the big reasons that his minutes have bumped here over the last little bit, in addition to the increased trust he's earning, you had the game 3 games back where Draymond Green was suspended. So Kuminga got 30 minutes in that one. He played 26 minutes in the other 2 games, and he was pretty solid in those, actually. And then he got 30 minutes in their most recent win in Dallas because Draymond was in foul trouble. There's also this sort of lingering issue of what is his fantasy stat set? We don't really, truly know. Over 26 minutes a game, last 2 weeks, Kuminga's right around the top 100, shooting 62% from the field, 67 at the free throw line, 16 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, half a steal, half a block, 1.4 3-pointers. Is there a universe where the steals and blocks come up for Jonathan? I think I would venture to say maybe. His 0.6 steals is relatively low. It feels like that's a number that could increase. Over the last week, where his minutes have been a little bit higher, he's at 0.8 steals and 0.8 blocks. Is it about playing time, or is it about the ebb and flow of steals and blocks in a smaller sample size? And the truth is, the steals are probably a number that is higher for him when the dust settles. The blocks, probably in that 0.6 range, does make sense for him in 26 to 28 minutes per game. The rebounds are not going to be that high because Draymond, when he's out there, grabs a lot of them. Looney, when he's out there, grabs a lot of them. And then everybody else is kind of fighting for whatever's left over. The assists are not going to be all that high. I mean, he's got these unbelievable shooters around him, but he's just not that skilled of a passer yet. It's coming along, but not great yet. Field goal percent is going to be pretty good. I don't know about mid-60s, but 50s is fine. And then free throw probably in the 70s instead of the 60s. So we're seeing a reasonable facsimile of what Kuminga's fantasy stat set probably profiles as, if you kind of extrapolate from a few different small sample size chunks. The problem is that we just don't have that much sample of him playing bigger minutes. That's been a much more recent development, and so we don't really know how all of this is going to shake out. But I feel like this is a situation where you kind of want to get out in front of it, even with only 17 days left in the season, or whatever the hell we have left. Is it less than that? No, it's about that, isn't it? 16, 17 days, something like that. He belongs on rosters. If things break right for him the rest of the way, he could get inside the top 100. And even if they don't, he sort of fits. He fills the schedule stream role while also having a little bit of built-in upside. And so that's why I left him as a rest of season ad, because I think there's kind of a little bit of both going on. Onyeka Okongwu. The timeshare thing is back, which is actually good for him. Because for about a week when Quinn Snyder took over, it seemed like he was trying to shoehorn Clint Capella into more minutes. But the Hawks are better when they can sort of bounce between those two dudes. And Okongwu's been awesome lately. His numbers, we could do the, how high has he been ranked over the last little bit stretch. But he's number 90, roughly, on the season. Last 2 weeks, he's number 30, shooting 71% from the field, 80 at the free throw line, 13 and 8 with a steal and almost 2 blocks per game. Yeah, I mean, that's not going to keep up in 21 minutes per ball game. But his fantasy numbers are terrific. And Over the course of the year, thanks to good health and Capella missing some time and just an incredible stat set, Okongwu is actually number 50 by totals on the year. It's pretty remarkable stuff. He's actually turned into, he's turned in a terrific fantasy season, despite the fact that there's been some ups and downs along the way. And, there are times where we got annoyed with it. There are times where he gets to go huge, the Capella's out games, where he's basically like a top 30 fantasy play. But overall, he's been excellent, and he's ending up on some wires. He was down in the mid 50s in rostership as of like 2 weeks ago, and that's insane. Competitive leagues, he's probably off the board already, but some of you might not be in hyper-competitive leagues. You have to account for all situations. And then Jalen Duren, who's apparently off the injury report for Detroit. I'm very happy that we'll probably get him back here tonight for one ball game this week, which I know sucks because then he's off for 2 days. But Roto, he's someone that needs to be on rosters. And then head-to-head, you could make an argument where it's not a great argument, mind you, because most teams you can still get 2 games left the rest of this week. But if you're looking towards next week and you're sort of stat hunting rebounds and defensive stats, he might do enough in one game to beat out a lot of the 2-gamers in just those categories. Not in other ones, not if you roll it all together. And then Detroit rolls into 8 games over their final 2 weeks. So there's an argument, it's not a great one, as I said, to be made for Duren on the head-to-head side. The argument for Jalen on the Roto side is much more clear. He and Wiseman will move back into a bit of a center timeshare, although we did see them play together briefly in the game before Duren ended up with whiplash or whatever was going on, cervical strain or soreness or something like that. All right, let's move into the injury streams. We'll go a little bit quicker through the other names on the board. I like to try to spend an extra little chunk of time on the rest of season ads because I think there's a discussion to be had there. The injury streams, I'll just give you the streamer and then who they're replacing, so that way you guys can draw your conclusions based on some of the news that might drop later today. Emmanuel Quickly with Jalen Brunson out, although the Knicks are now off until next week, so that's a terrible one on the head-to-head side, especially when you figure Brunson has a decent chance to be back with all of these days off. Captain Obvious one, Nick Richards filling in for Mark Williams. He's been awesome. Trey Murphy, who has found a role again. It seemed like he got squeezed out, but he's squeezed back in. Zion is ramping up, so this is a Zion replacement for now. There's just almost no way. I mean, we saw what this team was like at the beginning of the year. There were 4 games. Literally, sorry, Pelicans fans. This has been a tough go for you. There were 4 games this year where the Pelicans had the starting lineup that they intended, which is McCollum as the point guard, Herb Jones as the defensive guy, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and JV. That was the starting lineup that they intended. Do we think Trey Murphy might have jumped over Herb Jones? I think the answer is no, because once they have Zion back, they're going to just want some more defense out there. They'll save a gunner like a Trey Murphy to go lift the second unit. But do we see Zion? Sounds like he's still 2 weeks away, which leaves like 3 days if he comes back at that point. So this may just be rest of season. Denny Avdia in Washington with Bradley Beal sidelined for we don't know how long. Daniel Gafford also in Washington, and that one's because of Kyle Kuzma, which probably deserves about a 20-second explanation. When Kuzma's out, Porzingis slides down and gets more power forward minutes. It also helps Denny Avdia, mind you, but he's getting a big bump with Beal out anyway. There's just so much extra playing time, and the best option for the Wizards, if they still want to compete, is they'll go a little bit bigger. Dante DiVincenzo hanging on by a thread in this one. He's losing out to Jonathan Kuminga, who we just talked about a little bit before. It's possible that he falls off of this injury board, but that's due to the Andrew Wiggins absence. TJ McConnell with Tyrese Halliburton now. Don't worry, I have Andrew Nembhard in the watch list board. I just don't trust him on an exact day-to-day. If Halliburton gets ruled out for the rest of the season, which I still don't think is going to happen yet, then maybe you start to see okay, well, McConnell's kind of the next person to go sort of deal, but that hasn't happened, at least not yet. Chris Boucher with a bunch of Raptors out. Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent Jr. are the two that are out. I think Precious Achiuwa might have missed their last ball game as well. DeAnthony Melton's been amazing. Philly has been rotating someone being out for like 3 or 4 games in a row, and Melton goes enormous when that happens. He's been a first-round fill-in here over the last week. Trendon Watford with Jeremy Grant sidelined in Portland. That might be a rest of season play, depending on how things go. Shaedon Sharpe with Anthony Simons out. He's been the guy to step into that role. Not Cam Reddish, interestingly, although keep one eye. You know what? I'm going to throw Cam Reddish on the watch list in case Portland continues to shut people down, but we'll see. Chris Dunn and Taylor Horton-Tucker with Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson out for Utah. It's not really clear which injury has benefited which other person, so we're just kind of going with a 2 for 2 here. Ochai Agbaji, if Lauri Markkanen misses some time, which we believe that he will with the actual injury. Bismack Biyombo is more of a blocks, rebounds stream. I don't like him as a roto fill-in typically, but again, we're at a time of the year now where you're stat hunting in almost every format. Austin Reeves with LeBron out. This is almost a rest of season play, but it sounds like Bron is going to try to get back here for at least a couple of regular season games before what might be a play-in game if the Lakers can hang on there. And then Marvin Bagley is, he's coming off a gigantic ball game. Jalen Duren coming back is going to squeeze him a little bit, but I still think you can probably play Bagley with Isaiah Stewart out for the season. So again, is this a rest of season ad? Might be, but I felt like it was safer to just put it in this department because it kind of covers my butt in case some other big man rolls in and pushes Marvin, which could very well happen. Chopping block names. Neither of these is a must-drop player yet. I should add this little caveat before I get into it. Slow-mo, with Karl Anthony Towns slowly ramping up, it seems like he's still going to have a role, certainly in the short term here. But when Anthony Edwards, maybe that's what I should have put in there. When Anthony Edwards comes back, then maybe this thing turns on its head. And then with Tyus Jones, we know it's coming. The question is it the next game or is it the one after that? Holds. Hold on tight or loosely if you're a fan of, what was that, 58 Special? Hold on loosely or hold on tight. Hold on tight to Cole Anthony. Hold on tight to Devin Vassell. Hold on tight to Zach Collins. Hold on tight to Keldon Johnson. Hold on loosely to Trey Jones. Hold on loosely to Tari Eason. And hold on loosely to John Collins in Atlanta. You may have noticed that the vast majority of the names on the hold board were coming out of San Antonio. Because if you can get 3 out of every 4 games for those guys, it's good enough in all formats. If it starts to drop below that, that's when we will loosen our grip. Cole Anthony's a hold because he's just been good enough lately, and now Franz Wagner has a hurt ankle, so that might even become a slightly better scenario for Cole. Tari Eason is a hold-on loosely guy. You're seeing Houston actually trying to win a few games here down the stretch, which means they're going to play lineups that are successful. If he's in them, that's great. If he's not, he could still lose out, but Jayshawn Tate's been out for a couple of ball games, so that makes the decision a little bit easier there. And then with John Collins, he and Sadiq Bey were kind of battling. And even at the time, it felt like Quinn Snyder trying to make Collins earn his spot. And then he earned it. And so now he's getting to keep it, which is at least the way that looked to me from the outside. Watch list names. Svi Mikhailiuk is a watch list in Charlotte because it's conceivable that nobody plays for Charlotte tonight. It might be Svi and JT Thor, who's also on the watch list, and Nick Richards against the world. I legitimately don't even know who would soak up all the minutes. It could get real weird. It sure feels like it's going to get weird for Charlotte tonight, although maybe you get one of those other guys back in there, like maybe Hayward plays on the back-to-back, or maybe Rozier was precautionary, or Dennis Smith Jr., actually, he came out because of an illness, non-COVID illness, so he might be good enough to go tonight. And if he does, he'll probably have 9 turnovers, but he might also have 22 points, 15 rebounds, like 12 assists, and 6 defensive stats. It could be the Dennis Smith Jr. show if he's the last man standing. But I think you get a bunch out of Svi, you get a bunch out of Thor, but just, keep track of who's playing for Charlotte, and that's why those guys are on the watch list, and not more than that necessarily, at least until later on today. That's the kind of stuff that maybe we end up talking about on the second show today. Who's in, who's out for the Hornets. If we have that information early enough, we may have some really interesting, late day grabs. Who's next on that board? DeLon Wright. I didn't know where the hell to put DeLon Wright in this weekend review breakdown thing, because he got cut in a lot of places. So that would have, maybe made him, that puts him here on the watch list. I tried to hold on to him, so I still have him in like one spot where I was holding out hope that the Steels would get kicked back into gear. If Beal misses additional time, and then, there's still an outside chance that Monte Morris could get rested in a game here and there, you might see DeLon slot back into a bigger role, and we saw how unbelievably good he was in a slightly larger role. So keep maybe even more than one eye on DeLon Wright, because the sky is the limit for that dude, fantasy-wise. Andrew Nemhart, who I mentioned earlier on the show, is on the watch list. It's really all about confidence with him, because we've seen the big lines. He had a big line his last game. We've seen the bad lines. He had a bad line the game before that. He had a couple of big ones. He's been a bit all over the map. He has not had a defensive stat in his last 6 games combined, which feels like I don't think that's a bug. I just get the feeling that he's not a big defensive stats guy. But with the amount of usage he's had lately, there's a way to kind of overwhelm that a little bit. 25 points, 10 assists, and 3 3-pointers. Who cares if he has a steal? But 2 points and 6 assists the previous game, yeah, you definitely would like a steal or two to kind of buttress against the terrible. 22 points, only 2 assists the previous ball game. So, he's bouncing around a little bit. Makes a lot of sense on the points league side. While he's got this big role with Tyrese Halliburton out, so maybe that's why he should have been up in the streamer board in points formats. But 9Cat Roto, despite all the huge numbers, his rank is only 190 over the last 2 weeks. You can't be a goose egg in a few things and expect to still be a 9Cat value. Zeros, steals and blocks for 2 straight weeks. That'll kill you. I mean, that's truly brutal. Like, not even one. But again, points leagues, who cares? Because big points, big assists. And then this whole thing comes crashing down if Halliburton's playing anyway. I threw Patrick Williams on the watch list in case DeMar DeRozan has to miss any time. We've seen Caruso step up. We've seen Patrick Beverley step up. We've seen Patrick Williams step up. It just feels like Williams has the safest fantasy game of those dudes because he gets steals, blocks, and threes and can do it on decent percentages, where with Beverley, it kind of comes and goes a little bit out of the guard spot, and Caruso is almost all steals when he gets in there a little bit more. And Chicago's still fighting, so there's sort of no guarantee that any one of those dudes is going to collect all the DeRozan minutes. It just feels like Williams has the clearest path among them. But again, watch list. This isn't a stream. This isn't an ad. This is a, let's see how it shakes out kind of moment. And maybe it turns out to be nothing. And then, as you guys heard me do earlier in the show, I put Cam Reddish on the watch list partway through the pod, because there's still a chance that he plays his way into doing more in Portland. With Reddish, it might require Damian Lillard to sit down, because at that point, they'll be like, all right, dude, just get in there. The rest of these dudes don't really score. We need somebody to go create something, even if you're not a great passer. Like, screw it, figure it out. I would like for it to happen, because we saw for about 1 week that Reddish could translate to fantasy value because of the decent steals, but we ain't there yet based on the last few ball games, and that is why he's on the watch list. So again, now, and I forgot to take a break in the middle of the all these breakdowns to remind you guys to go get a fantasy pass for $5.99 a month, or get the wager pass. Those guys are destroying sports books right now. Crazy. And you can follow Ethos Wagering if you want to see all the information. They track every single play, and you get all of the handicappers rolled into one package for just $14.99 a month. But again, if you're playing fantasy, if you're about to segue into baseball, you got to get the fantasy pass. Just get on the fantasy pass. It's $5.99 a month. That's crazy cheap. You also get the rest of the NBA season premium. So you get the pickups of the night. You get premium access in Discord. You get the schedule grid, the streaming charts, projections, all that kind of cool stuff. And then you also get the baseball draft guide. And it powers our locomotive here at Sports Ethos. So please do check that out. Go to sportsethos.com, click on the premium tab, and choose Get Premium. And you can feel free to ask me or Joe Orico questions about it at all. Ethos Fantasy BB is the baseball fantasy tweeter here at Sports Ethos. There was something else that I was going to mention, and now I can't remember what it was, so we'll just go ahead and wrap up show number 1 for today. This was Week in Review. On our show later on today, we will look through the entire weekend. We'll do the 30-team weekend preview. We'll do some playoff schedule stream stuff that loops around into first thing next week as well. And we'll also talk about some of these injury streams that we discussed on this morning's show and how they translate into the action tonight based on who's in and who's out and what kind of info we get on that. Yesterday we did that show, I think around 2 o'clock Pacific time. Try to go just the tiniest bit earlier than that today. We'll see how timing shakes out. Yesterday we had all the crazy stuff going on with kids home on due to the strike. That is over today. The nanny will do a carpool pickup today, so my schedule opens up just a little bit. But stay tuned. We're kind of settling into a rhythm right now. Thanks for listening to all of the shows. Again, if you're hanging out with us live, please like and subscribe and stay after for the Q&A after the show. That's something that I really hope drives people from the recorded side over to the live YouTube audience, which is I am answering questions in the chat room after every show right now. Like an idiot, but I'm doing it. So until later today, later. All right, YouTubers, only a couple of questions left. I also wanted to wrap up before the Instacart person showed up. Figured that was wise. Oh, I did send out the Q&A tweet. I had tried to schedule it when I thought it might be time, but I got it wrong by a little bit. Let's take the weekend review stuff off the board now. What happens if I minimize it? Does it just turn into a blank spot on the screen? Oh, no, it's still there. I got to hit a different button. Bloop. All day and all the time, baby. Hey, let's take JD's advice first. JD says like and subscribe. Well, actually just says like. I say subscribe. Because again, as long as you listeners, new, old, whatever, as long as you guys continue to subscribe to the YouTube page, as long as I continue to see that number tick up little by little every day, I'll keep doing this stuff. It's all about growth. I try to do a lot on Twitter. You guys know that I am probably the most active analyst on Twitter on the planet. But we gotta get the good Sports Ethos word out in more places. All right, Filled Types dropped Beal for Avdia in a semifinals week. 9-cat head-to-head matchup is super close. How do you feel about that move? Yeah, I mean, he's out already. We know Beal has been ruled out for this ball game. Washington has one more on Sunday in Toronto. So at this point, you're saying, you know what? I'm getting 2 games out of Avdia. And a best case scenario for Beal would have been 1. So what is a worst case scenario? 1 big Denny game, 1 smaller Denny game. Roll those together, and you've probably got, probably in the 20s in points. Definitely over 10 rebounds. Avdia is a good rebounder. Maybe around 10 assists. Hopefully a steal. He didn't get one in their last ball game, but hopefully a steal percentages should be okay. Free throws not terrific for him. Not many 3-pointers. And then if you get your 1 good game out of Beal, you're talking probably 20-somethings in points. Probably, Beal likely wins the 3-pointer battle, but loses rebounds and assists. So, yeah, I mean, it's a reasonable calculation. And then in the better case scenario, Beal doesn't play in either game this week. You get 2 big ones out of Avdia. And so what you want to do as you're grading this out in your mind, and this is how you need to make a lot of decisions, is you take the midpoint. The midpoint is one good game of Avdia, and then instead of one bad versus one good, you say one middling game of Denny versus splitting the difference is like 2/3 of a Bradley Beal game. And the Avdia side wins that by a pretty substantial margin. So I have no problem with your move. The only way that this one backfires is, of course, Beal comes back and then someone else scoops him for next week. But you got to get through this one. Got to get there. Thoughts on Ingles as a stream on the back-to-back? Crowder's out. Joe's first return to Utah tonight. I don't think there's a big... well, I wouldn't put too much into the revenge angle, but I do like the idea that Milwaukee's probably going to rest different guys on both ends of the back-to-back because this is the start of a 5-game and 7-day stretch for the team with the best record in the NBA. So they don't really need to push anybody. So, yeah, I mean, you probably get 2 meh games out of Joe, and that could turn out okay for you. And the Instacart just arrived, so cool beans for me. In Roto, drop Kyle Anderson, Cole Anthony, Tyrese Maxey for Kuminga, Biyombo, Bagley. I'm desperate for steals and blocks. Well, I wouldn't drop slow-mo if you're desperate for steals and blocks. Maxey, I feel like I paid so little attention to Tyrese Maxey this year because he was on my avoid board because I thought he was getting wildly overdrafted. Yeah, he's not a big steals or blocks guy. And then Cole Anthony is also not a huge steals and blocks guy, but he's been doing more of them lately as guys have been going down for Orlando. I would say not Kyle. If you're just hunting steals and blocks, my 3 favorite names on this board are Slow-Mo, Biyombo, which, he's going to ruin your free throw percent, but he does get steals and blocks. And I'll go Maxey because overall he's just better than those other guys. But I almost went Cole Anthony. Oh, Dennis Smith Jr. is also available. Look, if he's playing, DSJ slots in there because he's a mondo defensive stats guy. But you got to wait and find out if DSJ is playing tonight. Hey, Dan, the top 10 player. This relates to a question that I answered before the show started. A top 10 player playing in high volume days with Sabonis, and the top 50 player playing low volume days next week is Bam or Jalen Green. Jalen Green, very much not a top 50 player in 9-cat Roto. I have no one playing next Saturday, so we're talking about next week. So Bam versus Sabonis. This must be points formats because Sabonis is not a top 10 player in 9-cat Roto. He's 21, and Bam is 31. They're a lot closer in 9-cat than points formats because Sabonis has the points boards and the assists, and then Bam has his edge because he's a better foul shooter. And the steals and blocks are a little better for Bam also. If you're just comparing those two guys, I'd probably lean towards Adebayo because it does feel like they're a little bit closer. But I know with points leagues, it's a little bit goofy making that comparison. Jalen Green, man, I think you still go with the top 10 guy. But just do the math. That's the thing about points leagues is you don't even really need me to tell you what to do. You're doing the math. Do the math on this one. So if there's someone that's getting pushed out of your lineup on the high volume days, figure out who that player is going to be. Be your 11th best guy. How many points do you gain with Sabonis going in over the bad guy going out? So if your 11th best player averages like 21 points per game in points league and Sabonis is 37 or something like that, you're getting a 16-point bump. How many of those is worth it versus whatever Bam gives you on the other days? So you just got to do the math yourself. That's the nice thing about points leagues is you don't even have to worry about the categorical stuff. Just run the numbers, figure out what the plus, the minuses are in each scenario, and then compare that to what you get out of the guys on the low volume day. Thanks so much for the feedback this week about aiming for a Pelicans player for next week and to sit Bam or Brunson the other day. Now I'm rolling to the finals again. Thank you. Yeah, sure, man. Honestly, I don't even remember what the hell I say from a day-to-day basis. Najee Marshall or Bones Highland? Woo, we're getting into the weeds here, aren't we? Well, Bones hadn't played for like weeks prior to this one. And obviously he did more because Paul George was out, but also the bench unit for the Clippers just got real hot. I'll go Najee because I think his minutes are a little bit more secure. But total coin flip here. Sorry, Timmy. I wish I could be a little bit more definitive. Trendon Watford or Marvin Bagley, last move I can make this week. I think you probably go Watford because you got 2 games out of Portland versus 1 of Detroit. Watford 2 versus Bagley 1. The 2 games wins. Points league. Yeah, same answer. Bagley or Duran? It's probably Bagley because he's starting, I would assume. Marvin will probably get 26 to 32 minutes. Duran, you're probably looking more in the 20 to 25 range. I like Duran's ability to produce per minute a little bit better. But it's Bagley because they're going to be a little bit cautious with Jalen Duran, I would figure. And that's it. That's it. Not a ton of questions today. Again, this is the time of year where you start to see things peter out. But like I said, as long as you guys keep liking and subscribing these things, I will continue to jam out as much YouTube content as I can possibly muster. So thank you, as always, for hanging out. We'll go into wrap-up mode here, again, unless anybody has a question at the last second. Oh, there's one. So, hey, last chance, YouTubers. Throw your ish in the chat room because I'm about to sign off here early today. Shaden Sharp and ad with Portland tank rolling. Based on last game, the volume was there. 9-cat head-to-head. So it bounces around a little bit. I'm assuming you missed the earlier part of the show where Sharp was on my injury replacement board. The issue with Sharp is that we haven't actually seen the stats translate. He has 7 steals in his last 2 ball games, and his previous 7 steals took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 games. And I know what you're thinking. Dan, what about the minutes per game? Yeah, I mean, he's at 63, 64 minutes over his last 2 games with those 7 steals. And if you want to look at 63, 64 minutes, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 previous games where he had 2 steals in 64 minutes. I don't think we know exactly what his fantasy stat set is, but I don't think it's 7 steals in 64 minutes. I also, he had 9 rebounds in his last ball game in 40 minutes. His previous 40 minutes, he had 3 rebounds. The one thing that actually paralleled is that in his last 40 minutes, he has 3 assists. In his previous 40 minutes, he also has 3 assists. So I think we were looking at like the best of everything for Sharp. I far prefer Trendon Watford as the ad in Portland right now, as long as Dame is still in there. Because I just don't think you see Shaden take 19 shots. Took 19 shots in 40 minutes. Previous 40 minutes, he took 11. Previous 40 minutes before that, he took 7. Previous 40 minutes before that, he took 10. So it feels like his per 40, if you want to do it that way, is more like 10, 11 shots. 1 to 1.5 steals, not 4. I don't know, 4 rebounds instead of 9, 3 assists. So, it's not a disaster. And he might score in the teens here because all of the other offensive guys are out. But teens in points, let's say like 13, 14 points, 2 3-pointers, 4 boards, 3 assists, and a steal is decent, but it's not game breaker stuff. So the answer to your question, Jalen, short answer to your question is kinda. Thibault? Sorry for last minute. Oh, this is in relation to this question. Roto, you're looking for steals and blocks. Yeah. Hell yeah, Thibault for steals and blocks. He's not going to get you anything else at all, but he will always get you steals and blocks, especially with the tank stuff going on. Even in a bad ball, I mean, that's the thing with Thibault. If you give him 25 minutes, he's probably going to get you 2 to 3 defensive stats. You can definitely rely on that if that's all you're hunting for. Yep, I got you, buddy. I remember. Okay, now we're done. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back in 3 to 4 hours. We'll do the afternoon show. Take a look at the weekend. See if we got any streaming info for tonight. And thanks again. Like and subscribe on your way out.